recently have been on a few different podcast episodes, and one of the things that keeps coming up more recently is my upbringing around money, my story, my family, things like that. And what I've realized is that there's a lot to unpack there with how I was exposed to money, what contributed to me understanding money at a young age, but also when you extract that out, I realized that there's something to share here with regard to how it worked for me and how different aspects, little things that happened in my life, which became so memorable as I started unpacking the stories. I remember vividly aspects of my classroom where we learned about money. I couldn't tell you what we learned about, in X grade. I actually think about this and go, the only things I remember are the things where we learned math or money. I don't really remember much else from school. And who would I be if I didn't share that with you in terms of how those lessons have shaped me and how I view money? Also, borrow from this as a sort of tool for how to teach your kids about money that I think work because I think they worked on me. But also, I don't have kids and I haven't taught kids this way before. I haven't been on the teacher side of it, but I've been on the student side of it. And I can tell you that this made a huge difference in my life. So I wanted to share that with you. And I'm going to share what I call the 3 B's of teaching your kids about money. It's kind of a 3-part framework. But also with all of these come experiences, examples, and lessons I learned in and out of school that really shaped how I view money. So I want to dive in with the first B, which is buying, being a good buyer. So what I mean by this is involving your child in the experience of purchasing, in the experience of transacting and exchanging money and energy. So bringing them up to the checkout counter, making sure they see prices. They help you make decisions on what to buy. They help you look at what is a cheaper or higher value product. So you teach them about value. This one is cheaper, but this one is more expensive. But the one that's more expensive has more items in it, more product in it. So like on a per weight, this one's actually a better value. Now, you might be thinking, I'm not teaching my kids that. They're too young to understand that. You would be surprised. You would be surprised. I want to say I had a 3rd grader that I was teaching when I was volunteering for junior achievement who totally understood that concept. So don't knock it. Teaching your kids about what value means, teaching your kids how to be a good shopper, teaching your kids how to look for the right brands and the right products that you look for, and to kind of get them to be price conscious, but also getting them to understand that the transaction that's happening so that they respect and appreciate when you're purchasing things. The last thing we want is to have things appear out of thin air and you have no idea how much they cost. And therefore, you don't know how to assign the value to them. And kids won't appreciate what you're doing for them because they don't understand how much things cost. I think actually having them understand what your bill looks like and your mortgage and how much money it costs to live is powerful. I remember my dad telling me how much he made and then telling me how much things cost. And I was like blown away because when he said how much he made, I was like, that's awesome. Oh my God, I could only imagine to make that much money. It was like $100,000 or something. He's like, I make this much money. And we were like, oh my God, that's amazing. It was so much money when I was a kid. And now I'm like, I remember him telling me that and then saying, but let me show you like where all that money goes and how much money I actually keep. And that was insanely powerful too, because I say, how much money do you make? And he would tell me. And I'm like, okay. But then he'd show me what's left over. And I was like, that's so unfair. Like, look how much goes to the taxes and look how much goes to this. And he's like, yeah, this is the reality. So making sure that your kid knows the value of $1 in the form of what it can buy you and what you get to keep. So I think buying is really key. The other aspect of buying that I think was really powerful was in 6th grade. I remember vividly, we actually learned about the stock market. We had to follow the stock market in the newspaper, mind you, because we were, this was like the year 1999 or something. We were looking at the stock market, 1998, I think. And what we were doing was we had a fake portfolio of stocks. Like we bought stocks on day one of this project. So we bought them and we had to track like how much we bought them for. We had basically had I don't know, $1,000, let's say. I think we had $1,000 or something like that to say you get to invest and buy stocks for $1,000. You get to decide the basket of stocks that you invest in. Now, we couldn't cup out and do like ETFs or anything like that. It was just like, I don't even think those were a thing then. It was just basically pick your stocks. And it was so funny because throughout the whole semester, throughout the whole year, we were like little Wall Street junkies running around going like, where's the paper? Like asking dad, where's the paper? I want to see how my stock did today. And it was all fake money, but it was funny because it was like, let me see how Toys R Us is doing. I invested in Toys R Us. Let me see how Apple is doing. Let me see how, IBM is doing. And it was funny because we were invested in a competition. It was actually a competition with groups to see who could make the most money by the end of the year. And some of you might be thinking, wow, that's funny. I've never had that. And I didn't know that this was like abnormal, but that was super fun. We had like a fake portfolio of stocks in 6th grade that we were playing with. And it was like a game. It was like a competition. So it actually kind of simplified and gamified it for us, where the stock market became less overwhelming, less intense because it was part of a game. So I never really took it that seriously. I always looked at it as playing the game. Whenever I saw the stock market, I would think of those days when I would ask for the paper so I could see how the Dow Jones was doing when I was like 13. But the other thing that happened, and this gets into the second B, which is budgeting. The other aspect of this with budgeting is, I'm not saying to teach your kids to have a budget. I mean, that is great. That is great. But I'm thinking budgeting in the form of, I'm not saying like give them a diet of money. I'm not saying like give them money and then have them budget it. I'm saying have them perform the function of budgeting, if you will. And I'll give you an example. So what we did was, when we were in 4th grade, I remember this class vividly as well. We were in 4th grade and we were told by our teacher to get into groups. And we had, I want to say it was like a couple $1,000s, maybe $5,000 or something. I don't know how far that would go back then. This was 4th grade, would have been like, God, 97, something like that. So in the 90s, we were, now keep in mind, in the 90s, we also weren't Googling anything. So we had catalogs. We had like the catalogs for like Circuit City. This goes way back. And the key here was that we were expected to take these catalogs, take these things, and we were going to be given a certain sum of money. And they said, furnish a house. Like, you just got a new house. I need you to put furniture in it. So what was interesting was we were having normal conversation in that class. Like the 9-year-old kids were having conversations around, say, me and my friends were saying, hey, this couch costs too much money. If we buy this couch, we basically can't afford a kitchen. So we knew that we had to put in a stove, we had to put in a fridge, we had to do this. And we would fight over like, we don't need a washer dryer. But then you would go, well, like, we need a washer dryer because we can't, we don't want to have to pay with the coins or go down the street. Like, we were given all these scenarios, like how much it was going to cost if we didn't get the appliance and we had to go pay, like go to a laundromat instead. So it would actually show, how much it would cost. Like, if you don't have one of these things, here's how much it's going to cost you to rent it, or here's how much it's going to cost you to use someone else's. That was insanely powerful. So we were given basically a budget, but we were given just an amount and saying, this is how much money you have, and then this is what you get to go spend. It forced us to think differently about limitations and to work within the bounds of constraints. This is what it was teaching us to do, was work in the bounds of constraints and solve a problem. So our constraint was we only had a limited amount of money. And the other issue was we had to work together with our own preferences, our own tastes, our own like desires and ideas to furnish a home. And it took forever. I remember this vividly, of clipping out, like, we had to put it on a poster board and we had to clip out from the catalog what we bought with the prices, and we had to stay under the budget. And I remember how difficult that was, because we had to make choices. We had to make compromises. And it taught you how to work within constraints, to make compromises, and to understand the impact of a decision. So if I say yes to this, I have to say no to that. And being okay with that, and kind of grappling with a yes here means a no there, and that's okay. And I'm making that choice consciously. And I think if someone had explained to me back then what we were doing, it would have made no sense to me. But in retrospect and in looking and reflecting on it, that is one of the coolest skills you can teach a kid, is to work within constraints, to make decisions, to make core decisions about their finances. Lastly, the other thing that we should be teaching kids is how to be a borrower. Because here's the thing. It doesn't mean teach your kids to get into debt, but how to be a good borrower. When I was 18, my dad and I were talking about how I was leaving for North Carolina for college. And he said, we need to get you your first credit card. I had a debit card from my own personal checking account at that point, but I did not have a credit card. So he said, I need you to keep this credit card for emergencies in school. Now, what he told me was the money that's on this card is not your money. The money that's on this card is someone else's money that you are borrowing. And every month you have to pay it back. So if you can't afford to pay it back right away or within a couple weeks, you can't afford it, period. So do not run a balance on this card. Do not carry it over. It was kind of like this floor is lava moment. Like, when you're a kid and they're like, floor is lava, can't touch the floor. For me, that was my dad saying, this isn't your money. You cannot carry a balance. Like, something will blow up if you carry a balance. Like, I never carried a balance in 20 years. I've never carried a credit card balance because of this lesson. My dad always told me, you can't carry a credit card balance. Like, you have failed if you carry a balance. And do I believe that? No. Do I understand why he said that? Abso-freaking-lutely. Do I know why he was so draconian about it? Yes. Because I knew what he was trying to do. He was trying to make me into a good borrower in the sense of knowing my obligations to repay any debt that I take on. When we were looking at schools, we were talking about student debt. We were talking about loans and talking about how I was going to have to pay back all these loans if we took loans and what that would do to my limitations on choosing colleges. So although you might be thinking, damn, like that's a lot of advanced conversation, Shan, for like a kid. Here's the thing though. They were not intimidating. They were not overwhelming. They were normal. These were normal conversations in the Keene household. It was my dad's choice to make that normal. He's the one who made that normal. It was normal for us to have those conversations because he made it so, because we just had those conversations, just like you would have any other conversation at the dinner table. The difference is how willing he was to make that normal and to not paint it with this idea that this is a big deal to teach me. It was just very regular conversation. And if you feel like, you know what, Shannon, like your dad, he was a CPA, he gets this stuff. Like, I don't get this stuff. How am I going to teach my kids about this? Borrow from these examples. Have it be as simple as, hey, we're gonna furnish, where if we were to redo the kitchen, like give them a little project, a little fun hypothetical. Have them go, like, even if they're young, God help me, these young kids are probably on tablets and on Pinterest and on all the things. But if you gave them like a Pinterest account and said, I want you with a budget, I want you to go, this is like your little activity, right? I want you to go furnish your room, like a room with this budget. You know, like, oh, I want to redo my room. Cool. Here's your budget. Send me a little proposal of what you want in your room and how much it's going to cost. That would be kind of fun, I think, for some kids. It's kind of a game. It's kind of a problem-solving game. And it would be a really cool way to teach them about money. I think that we don't have to teach our kids about money all the time the way a professor would or the way a teacher would. You don't have to teach them the book version of money, like the textbook version. Teach them through experience. Teach them through having them solve problems, but needing to use money to make the solution happen. Teach them by actually immersing them in the language of money and into transactions and into exchanges that will really move the needle for them. This is really, really important as we step into our next generation of society, that people are savvy about how to handle money, because I think that with, volatile economies and everything changing, it's going to become imperative that we know how to handle our own money and that we become protective of it and that we are savvy enough to know how to manage it. So if you pull anything from this, I hope it's something that will help equip you to teach your kids about money into the future, or even for yourself, giving yourself a little bit of tools here to help you become more comfortable with the concept of money and understand how folks can simplify this down to even the level a kid could understand.